الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد أحبتي في الله, continue on in our study of قواعد al-Arba, the four principles of Shirk. And of course, if we want to understand Tawheed with Itqan, to really understand Tawheed, then we also need to know its opposite, which is Shirk. We have to have some understanding of what is Shirk. So that way we have knowledge of what is Tawheed and what is Shirk. And we talked about this in the introduction. And a faida that I heard today, which was very beneficial, from Sheikh Abu Salah Al-Afghani. He's one of our Kuwaiti mashayikh who's originally Afghani, meaning from Afghanistan. And alhamdulillah, we studied with him in Medina, and he is well known in the Ahl Sunnah. And the faida that he brought about in his study of a treatise on Tawheed, which is by his sheikh, and I forgot his sheikh's name because I wasn't familiar, somebody Abdul Samad, who was a Kuwaiti sheikh who died maybe 35 years ago or something like this, quite a long time ago, about 30 years ago or something similar to that, maybe less. And so anyhow, he has a book, and Sheikh Abu Salah was explaining his book about Tawheed, and a faida and a qa'ida that he mentioned. So a benefit and a principle that he mentioned, and I never thought about that. He said, and this directly relates to what we're studying about Tawheed and so forth. He said that kullu shay faqada, أو كل الناس فقد توحيد أو فقد إخلاص فقد أشرك أو مثل هذا، وكل ما فقد عمل فابتدع. Beautiful. And so I paraphrase this qaida. I kind of messed it up in Arabic, but anyhow, what he said was absolutely very relevant. Now, before we translate what he said, let's look at something real quick. We know in order to have our deeds accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, two conditions have to be in place, right? First, that we have ikhlas lillah, that is sincere, we're worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thani, the second, is that it's in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, for example, if you pray, I just prayed Maghrib. Isha will be coming up very soon, probably in the next 20, 30 minutes. When Isha comes in, I pray. And what if I decide, I think I'm going to pray, I want extra reward, let me pray 5 rakat. So that means, and I'm sincere, my heart is open to Allah Azza wa Jal. Sincerity. And I'm no shirk, not for anyone, but I decide I need more reward, I'm going to pray 5 rakat. That means I missed following the sunnah. Bid'ah, that's a bid'ah. وَكُلُّ بِدْعَةٍ ضَلَالَةٍ, and all bid'ah leads astray. And the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ أَحْدَثَ فِي أَمْرِنَا هَذَا مَا لَيْسَ مِنْهُ فَهُوَ رَدٌّ. Whoever innovates in this religion of ours will have it rejected. So that means that act of worship, which I intended to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with sincerity, is now batil. It's now fasid. It doesn't count for anything. Okay? So that means it had the condition of ikhlas, sincerity, but it didn't have mutaba'. I didn't follow the Prophet ﷺ. I came up with a newly invented prayer, which is a newly invented matter. Like, so we understand that those two conditions need to be in place. If I want my Isha Salat accepted, I have to pray without shirk, sincerely to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I have to, and it has to be how the Prophet ﷺ prayed, okay, 4 rakat, 4 prayer units, and the rest of the salat in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Then inshallah ta'ala my salat is maqbool. It'll be accepted by Allah Azza wa Jal. So the faida Abu Salah mentioned, he said that every act or deed that doesn't have ikhlas, sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is a form of shirk. That it meets the criterion for shirk, that because you shared in ibadah. Now that could be shirk al-akbar, it could be shirk al-asghar, depending on the amal, depending on a lot of things, which change the hukum, whether it is shirk al-akbar, which takes you out of the fold of Islam, or shirk al-asghar. Okay, shirk al-akbar, for example, that same example, if I was praying to Allah, I was praying Salatul Isha, and I was praying purely for people. I had, my heart wasn't, it had nothing to do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My intention was to please the people. That would be pure shirk. And so perhaps that would fall under shirk al-akbar, because I prayed for the people. I only wanted them to see. That's the only reason I prayed. Otherwise, I wasn't even going to pray. It could be, excuse me, it could be shirk al-asghar if maybe during the prayer, I began praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then I got distracted and I started to show off a little bit because people were watching or in the room or what have you. And I began to show off, and then I cut that off and I come back to, my prayer, or, there was just a little bit of showing off, let's just say. So that riyah, that is shirk al-asghar. That's the minor shirk. So there might have been a little showing off, but it wasn't purely for the, it wasn't committing shirk al-akbar, praying to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or strictly for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or otherwise. So that would be shirk. So that would be if ikhlas was not present. The other part of that principle that he mentioned, he said that whoever does an act of worship, not in a and there's shortcomings in the deed of action, meaning they've changed it, then this is a bid'ah. Okay, so if it is missing sincerity, then it is fallen into shirk. This person is fallen into shirk. And if it's missing correct amal, then this person is fallen into bid'ah. So I just thought it was the way he articulated much better than I could. I hope that was somewhat clear, but it was just a big faida in that qaida, in that principle. It was very clear. I was like, wow, he just said that, bang. I love Abu Salah because he has ilm, and he is a very powerful teacher. So for those who have Arabic, I would advise you, listen to Sheikh Abu Salah Al-Afghani. And this means, I've listened to a lot of different ulama. He's very young, and he is a teacher. Some scholars are teachers, meaning, and they literally are teachers. In Saudi Arabia, a lot of the scholars there, many of them, they have jobs at the university. Some of the ones, sorry to get off topic, but just since we're on there, some of the scholars that are excellent teachers, so if someone has Arabic, some that are excellent teachers that are in Medina that I know of, Sheikh Ubaid Jabri is very good, because he, although sometimes his language might be a little higher in some respects, he may use certain words, but generally he teaches where even the kind of common people can understand, and the beginning student of knowledge, and he really is an excellent teacher. He keeps it simple. He's very good for getting you strong in basics. Okay, Sheikh Suleiman Raheli also, he is very enthusiastic about teaching, and he is a powerhouse in knowledge. So he teaches you very complex things sometimes, and he can simplify it. That is the goal of a teacher. It's not to confuse you, not to give you big words and give you big terms to confuse you, but rather to articulate and hopefully raise up the people who are listening to improve themselves and to learn. And this is also what we find in this treatise, as well as most of the treatises of Muhammad Abdul Wahhab. They're simple, as we mentioned. They give you, a lot of times, like Kitab al-Tawheed, he just gives you the chapter title, then he gives you Qala Allah, he gives you Allah said, and he gives you wa Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He gives you ayah, hadith, and maybe one of the some aqwal of the salaf. And that is the whole usloob of the book. Bab Qawlullahu ta'ala. Bab, so this is very important, ahabati fillah, in teaching and in learning. And this opens the heart of the listener if he's bringing the message to the people. Getting back on task, so going back to the treatise, the Imam said, so if you know that Allah created you to worship him, then know that worship is not considered worship except with tawheed. So that means worship that is done, and goes back to the example we were just talking about, that if it can only be sound in true worship, Islamic worship, if it has tawheed, if it has that ikhlas, like we said, because they have our deeds accepted, they need tawheed, they need ikhlas, sincerity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're worshiping only Allah, and they need to be in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's the one who told us and delivered and articulated and practiced the message so that we could learn how to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala properly. It was according to his sunnah. It wasn't according to the marid or the wali or the Sufi sheikh or the whatever sheikh, but rather it was in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and that's what we're ordered to follow. Wa'ati'u Allah wa'ati'u Rasul. Obey Allah and obey his messenger. He said, likewise, prayer is not considered prayer without purification, without tahara. So you can't consider salat, unless you purify, unless you meet that condition by preparing yourself for prayer. Therefore, if shirk enters into worship, it nullifies it, similar to how an impurity invalidates purification. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushrika bi, wa yaghfiru ma duna dhalika liman yasha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, verily Allah does not accept associating partners with him, but he forgives other than that for whomsoever he pleases. So Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala doesn't forgive shirk. And that's why it's imperative that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with ikhlas. Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala says, fi kitab al-kareem, O children of Israel, worship Allah, my Lord and your Lord. Verily, whoever associates partners with Allah, then Allah has prohibited him from paradise, and his abode is hell, and there is no supporter for the zalimeen, for the oppressive sinners. So it shows us, all of this is to show that shirk is ghayr maqbool. It destroys tawheed. It's the opposite of tawheed. Your ibadah will not be accepted, and that's why we have to know tawheed and we have to know shirk. Then the Imam, he said, he mentioned, so as an explanation of what we said, shirk or associating partners with Allah is the most grievous, and whoever dies, the most grievous sin, and whoever dies on the major shirk will abide in hellfire forever. And that's what the ayat shows us. Inna Allah la yaghfiru an yushrika bihi wa yaghfiru ma duna dhalika liman yasha. A person who commits minor shirk will have the deed in which they committed shirk invalidated. Okay? So the major shirk takes you out of the fold of Islam. Wa'iyadhan billah. The minor shirk, it invalidates the deed that you did. So if you committed minor shirk, for example, in your salat or in zakat or whatever, that act of salat, not all your salat, but that particular act that you did that bid'ah in, that you did that shirk in, is invalidated. And that's what distinguishes it from the major shirk. The minor shirk and the major shirk, they're different. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, fi kitab al-kareem, we have revealed unto you and those before you that if you commit shirk, your deeds would be nullified and you would be one of the khasirin. You'll be one of the losers. An important principle, which is derived from the Sheikh's analogy between tawheed and shirk, and purity and impurity, is that the reality of something is not in its name, but in its real substance. Jamil Jiddan. This is a very important principle. Okay? So what we understand from that is a beautiful fiqh principle, which is Al-ibra bihaqa'iq laysa bimusammiyat. That the reality of something is in its substance, not in its name. What does this relate to here? This relates to Tawheed. So it doesn't matter if someone, for example, they say they're a believer, and they say they're a mu'min, and they say that they're from Ahl Tawheed and the Muwahideen, but they go to the graves and then they pray to Abdul Qadir Jailani, or they pray to Bedawi, or they pray to any of the saints, or even Fusaq, or anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They go to the grave and they supplicate and they cry. That's shirk. Even though they consider themselves and they call themselves one of the muwahideen, even if they called that tawheed, they said, hey, I just need some wasta, I need intercession. So that's why I'm going to Sayyid Bedawi and I'm going to pray to him so that way he carries my dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because I'm a sinner. I'm not clean enough. I have too many sins. Just like who? Just like the Catholics. They go to the priest and they confess their sins. Why don't they confess their sins to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the one who can forgive them? Because they believe they have to go through an intermediary, and those priests have established themselves as intermediaries between them and their Lord. And of course, all the other shirkiyat that they do. But we're just talking about in general, the act of worship. So it doesn't matter if someone calls that ibadah, it is false ibadah. The reality of something is in its substance, not in its name. You can call yourself from Ahl Sunnah. That's a name. But the reality is in what your aqidah is. Your creed. Is your creed the creed of Ahl Sunnah? Is your a'mal, the amal, the deeds of Ahl Sunnah? Is your methodology for understanding Islam the minhaj? Is it the minhaj of Ahl Sunnah, or is it the minhaj of Ahl Batil? Is it the minhaj of Ikhwan al-Muslimin? Is it the minhaj of Ahl Takfir wa Hijrah? Is it the minhaj of the Khawarij? Is it the minhaj of the Mu'tazila? Some other group. The reality is the substance, not the name. And this refers back to ibadah as well, as we mentioned. Therefore, if a person claims to follow monotheism and worship Allah alone, but yet they commit shirk, then this cannot be considered valid worship, because it contradicts monotheism. It contradicts Tawheed. For example, those individuals that utter the testimony of faith, the Shahada, and then they go to the Prophet ﷺ's grave and supplicate to him sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they've committed shirk. Even though they believed they were coming closer to Allah and they believed they were doing one of the most honorable acts of ibadah, but they went to the grave of the Prophet and they said, Ya Nabi Allah, please give me a wife. Please give me wealth. Please make my wife she's barren. Please this. It's shirk. It's shirk, and it takes you out of the fold of Islam. It's shirk in dua. This is a major shirk, wa'iyadhan billah, to supplicate to other than Allah. So in this sense, they cannot be considered as fulfilling the worship we were created for, due to their mixing shirk with worship. Shirk contradicts and negates Tawheed, and authentic worship is only based on Tawheed. So real worship, it's only based on Tawheed. That's what's accepted. Another example of shirk is that is often construed as correct Islamic worship in Tawheed is supplication directed towards pious individuals. And we just said about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Some people, they pray to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or they pray to pious individuals or saints, or people who they believe are pious individuals or saints. Unfortunately, many people who make the Shahada, many Muslims fall into the trap of directing their supplication to people they believe to have holy status. This is usually done under the guise of love for the saint or sheikh in question, as a means to draw nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we mentioned prior, they seek intercession from other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They seek to draw nearer to Allah. Tawassul, but tawassul shirkiyah, bid'iyah, kufriyah, by seeking to draw nearer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through other means which are muharram, like going to the dead, or something like this, or asking your sheikh to do something that he can't, he has no power over. For example, the one who says, "Oh, my sheikh so and so, what time? When is the hour going to be established? When is Yom Al Qiyamah, sheikh? I want to prepare for this." And he says it's going to be in 2025, whatever. Then this is kufr and this is shirk, because now you are asking him about the ghaib and believing that he shares in this knowledge of the unseen with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And maybe you supplicate to him, or you don't supplicate, you just ask him. But you ask him something that for sure he doesn't know. But there are many claimants who claim this. Wa'iyadhan billah, and it's all shirk and it's kufr. And so as we get into the treatise, you'll see how this is a heretical practice. So we're going to go, Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Wahhab rahimahullah ta'ala, then he said, therefore, so after he mentioned about shirk, he said, therefore, if you grasp that shirk, when it mixes with worship, nullifies it and negates the deed it took place in, and the one who commits major shirk will be of those who dwell in the hellfire forever, then you realize the most important thing for you is to comprehend this in hopes that Allah will free you from this web, various types or means of shirk. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Kitab al-Kareem, Inna Allah la yaghfir an yushrika bi wa yaghfir ma duna dhalika liman yasha. Verily, Allah does not accept associate partners with him, but he forgives other than that for whomsoever he pleases. By knowing four principles Allah the Almighty has mentioned in his book, it will protect you from shirk. So here the Sheikh alludes to the fact that polytheism negates a person's monotheistic belief. Polytheism, shirk negates tawheed, as they are polar opposites. They are the polar opposites. And although a person may have a general monotheistic creed, they delude themselves when they mix un-Islamic practices by diverting worship from Allah Ta'ala to another being, a deity, or a created entity. And we ask Allah Azza wa Jal, the Almighty, to accept our good and forgive our evil. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, and until the next dars, in which we will get into the first principle. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If there's a question related to the topic, tafaddal. If not, then we will until the next lesson. Bi idhnillah ta'ala.